Well, I am delighted to say that joining us on the Godcast today is Peter Duncan, who is an actor, a performer, presenter, probably best known for being the presenter of legendary TV show Blue Peter, and he's been Chief Scout. And I'm really, really delighted to welcome you to the Godcast. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Just look at me now. I can see my own image on the Zoom thing. Really, I must get a haircut. Thank goodness for the vaccine, eh?
Peter, where are you in the world? Where are we speaking to you from?
I'm in Wandsworth in London on a beautiful sunny day. Yeah, there's three beautiful sunny days, one after the other, I think. So I've taken to the garden. So I apologise for being a bit late.
Yeah. I suppose when people want to talk to you, they often want to bring up Blue Peter. So let's kind of do a bit of the Blue Peter stuff first. I mean, it's a long time ago, isn't it? But when you look back, you must have happy memories from that time.
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do, really. It's the 80s, early 80s and on and off in the 80s. And yeah, I'd been an actor before that. And I suppose, I don't know, I had opportunities to do it a couple of times. And it just felt something very different to do. It was a touch of the actor's world, if you like, tends to be a little housefly, nicely, a bit inward looking sometimes, all about self and self-expression, and we might be telling good stories, but there's something about Blue Peter which was looking a bit more outwards. And still, obviously, a fantastic job to have and lots of fun. But there was something about that. It was, in that sense, it was a little more altruistic, a little bit. And even though you were having a good time and traveling and being on live TV, it was about other people a bit. Which we should all be Blue Peter presenters at the moment.
How did it come about then? Because I mean, lots of people will know that you did have you were well up and running on your acting career, weren't you? How did the gig actually come about then?
Well, I did a kid series about Speedway called King Cinder with my good friend Leslie Manville, who's now a superstar, and we went on to we both auditioned for it, strangely enough, and we were actually partners living together, and then we both got the job. So not only were we living together, we're doing this TV series together. And it really, because it was very popular with young people, and often they always look for Blue Peter. Blue Peter presenters are often actors before they became presenters. So I just kind of got in the frame, and and I got offered the job, and eventually, after a lot of prevarication, I did it sort of a couple of years later. So
yeah, and when you were a child, were you always destined for the world of entertainment? Was it a goal from a really early age?
Well, my parents were variety performers, so they used to put on pantomimes and summer seasons. So I certainly grew up in that sort of world in the sort of late 50s, early 60s. But it's odd, what your parents do is often not what you do. That was very much their world, and I didn't actually imagine I would do that, and it almost happened by default, really. I did the school play like lots of people do, and I got, obviously with the background a bit, and I just got immersed in it, and then I got a professional job, and then I just kept going right up till now.
Still going, yeah. So was there much faith? Was there any faith in the family? I'm familiar with St Stephen's on the Cliff in Blackpool, which is a church where quite a lot of the summer season entertainers would use while they were staying in Blackpool for worship.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? No, there wasn't in the family. My mother used to call herself a humanist, which was a way of saying I don't really believe in God, but I believe in something more than that. My father, after his war experiences as a merchant seaman, decided that there was no such thing. But oddly, as a child, I went to the Scouts at my local church in Beckenham, and I joined the choir. And I got myself confirmed, actually, which was a strange thing to do. But I'd always been a curious child, really. And I sort of, a bit like The Life of Pi, that character. And I don't know if you know that book. I have often, what I would say, explored the spiritual realm, if you like, and it sounds a bit crass, but the idea of sort of, well, you know, I'll be a Buddhist this morning, or no, I'm not saying one day, every day I do something, you know, yoga, and having traveled the world quite a lot, I've seen the virtue of faith and also the downside of it, really. So, but in my youth, I had that interest in and certainly took it kind of seriously, and it wasn't led from my parents, because a lot of young people get their faith from having quite domineering parents, you know, who say you must follow our faith, our God is the only God, and lots of people you know, reject it because of that, particularly Catholicism, I would say, because you always hear that, but then they say once a Catholic. So in your own country, one is driven by you know, by the faith of the land, and Christianity is the faith of the land, and that's the first thing when you're young. It either intrigues you, or you know, you reject it because your parents do it, or, you know, it's a strange route, isn't it, really? But clearly, you know, the mystery of existence is a question that we all have to face, particularly in times like this. And I think what in my age now, I've decided that there are more than two kinds of human beings, but two kinds in particular. One people that need a solid faith to get by, and they need it ordered, they need their God, they need their system, they need their community that's based on that. And then there's people who are kind of against that, and all this stuff about people believing in strange conspiracy theories is very much about finding a faith, finding that something that you can lock onto, that is a truth. But I'm one of those people who I think now who is happy to live in the mysterious veil of not knowing. Really, I very much like the primitive, you know, like so-called primitive human beings, where they happily exist on this, you know, a beautiful planet. They happily exist with the sense that, you know, they should do good things, and they you know, but you know, we humans have a terrible, like all animals, a very dark side and a very good side. And I mean, this is a very long answer. I'm sorry. Obviously, I couldn't wait to talk to you. This is bordering on a confessional. I suppose I've just had experiences, you know, which I'm very happy to tell you about, because with my Christian friends, I do tell these stories to them, and there's a couple of events in my life which are quite, I think, profound, really, which you would think would make me a very religious person, but I'm not really, although I have as I explained earlier. And one of them was I actually, in the mystery plays, played Christ, and I did it twice. I did it once in Dartford, which seems a strange place to do it. I mean, if any of your listeners, I'm sure they know, but the mystery plays are really ways that when people, before they could sort of read and write, you know, you would tell stories from the Bible, and the local community we'd all play parts, and we, you know, we tell the stories, really, and that's and the morals, and, you know, it was a way of I suppose what Facebook's turning into, a moral high ground. You know, this is how you should behave to one another, although they're failing. And then and I had and it was in Dartford. I had this experience, and it was a conscious experience. It wasn't a dream. You're smiling because you like stories like this, don't you?
I do.
So I'm sitting in my car, and I've just done a matinee, and I've been up on the cross, and I've said, why have you forsaken me, and all that, and I acted my little heart out on probably a Wednesday matinee, and then these two old ladies see me sitting in my car, and they come over and they go, "Oh, there he is." I thought, oh, they've recognized me. Yes, I was Jesus. No, they thought I was their taxi driver. So they got on the back of the car, and I explained that I wasn't their taxi driver, but they didn't really believe me. So I dropped them off wherever they had to go. And then I was, you can call it, you'd probably call it a lot of things really, but I was overwhelmed by a force that came with me. I was overwhelmed by a sense, I mean, I referred to life being mysterious and to be comfortable with that. But this experience was absolutely opposite. I actually felt I knew everything. It was like I'd opened that magic door that Christ walks through, and there I could see everything. I could see everything about myself. It's like the world was transparent. I was in a timeless place. It was, if I saw 1,000 angels in front of me, I wouldn't have been surprised. It wasn't like I had visions. It was an overwhelming, powerful sensation. And I've always found that deeply intriguing, especially as I was playing Christ. I often thought, was this a message that I should be doing something? Have I got this, my system of belief completely wrong here? And that feeling has stayed with me all my life. And I don't know if it changes my behavior, but it certainly gives me a sense of mysteriousness. And obviously since then, and before then, I started to travel quite a bit, and I saw other things in the world and other faiths and other systems of people's, how they try to behave well. And as I said earlier, the goodness that faith can do, or the control that it can have over people, so we don't all try to massacre each other, really, because I think without it, the world would be a much worse place. Yeah. I'll stop now. I'm sorry, I've prattled on.
Peter, that is probably the longest answer I've ever had, but really, really worth listening to. Really worth listening to, because I do like those kind of stories, and it just kind of adds to my portfolio of stories like that. I really don't think I should be sat here as a priest, but I am, and my story is bizarre as probably others are. But I just was wondering, when you said about how old were you when you were confirmed, and what your parents felt about you saying, I'm going to go get confirmed? Were they fully behind that, or did they start thinking, well, what is Peter doing?
No, I think they were very, I lived in a very liberal kind of, I imagined it as a very liberal theatrical household, and the church thing, the local church was going to Sunday school church, and a little bit of drama with that, and the choir, and I don't know, and the scout, being a Cub Scout, I just think it was all tied in, and I it's partly the cleverness of church buildings, the spires, and they look like special places. If you were an alien that came to Earth and you see the buildings pointing up to the heavens or pointing upward, you would think these are places something special must go on. So I suppose as a child, but I don't think that I have no memories of my parents sort of being, you mustn't go to church, do not believe, there's nothing like that. It's very, the Church of England is a very benign force. It doesn't force you to stick to its, it's of all the Christian ethos in the UK, I think it's the one that just lets you come and go when you want, really.
Unless you're the vicar.
Yes, exactly. Yes, you have certain times and dates, especially on a Sunday. Yeah.
Peter, just moving on to your kind of your career as it started to grow and evolve, and I mean, you strike me as a man with a lot of humility. But when did you actually recognize in yourself that you were a young person with a lot of potential and talent, or how did that kind of play out? What were people saying to you?
The talents. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a difficult question to answer that. A sense of self, you mean, and value in what you might do with your life. It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, in terms of, I said that thing about being an actor and being slightly self-centered, I mean, which is often a tag of youth, isn't it? And part of human nature, that you have to be assertive when you're young, which is why now it's so difficult, because they're the very people that are not being able to engage with the world for all kinds of ways. So, and I don't mind the arrogance of youth, and I suppose everybody has that a bit, and that's part of physical human nature. But I think for me, I was a shy child, and I think I wasn't outgoing. I think that's maybe what my parents did. And I took a long time to develop into, I wouldn't say a confident human being, but I took a long time to realize that self-expression was an important thing. So probably my late 20s. And I think I've often wondered whether the Blue Peter thing was an actual job that I felt I should do, because it would make me go not into my comfort zone, and to sit and to do live TV and to take physical risks. I was very good at taking physical risks, probably less so an emotional risks, but it did sort of bring me out of myself a bit, and having to force myself into a sort of a place. So my confidence began to grow really as I got to my late 20s.
Who was it? Did you follow John Noakes on Blue Peter? I can't.
Not actually, but sort of spiritually. But yes, no, I took up his mantle, if you like. Being the daring do type of person.
Was that daunting in any way? Because I mean, even now people talk about John Noakes, don't they? As one of the real top legendary figures of Blue Peter.
Yeah. It was a generational thing. So each person, I just did a radio this morning. Men, particularly in their 40s, often say, "Oh, you were my hero." So, but if you're younger than that, it's somebody else usually. So it's almost like role playing. Really, you were playing a role where the order of what you did, especially if you did adventurous things, you were.
Yeah, I was wondering if Biddy Baxter was an influence upon you, because she'd been at the helm, or she'd been around Blue Peter for, well, not centuries, but a long time, hadn't she?
Yeah, she was. She obviously saw something in my personality that knew that it was right, because it's difficult, if children, like in a play, in a film, if people don't respond to you, and the difference is if you're playing a character, and then lots of actually presenters or people on telly are being a character. They're not real people. I mean, I think there's a requisite that Blue Peter presenters mainly have a truth about them, because I think young people see through that very quickly, that if you're a bit of a phony or pretentious, that you're soon rejected, or this, they just turn off. So I think she was always looking for people that might, as they say, go through the lens, and someone who spoke from the heart a bit, or and I think so. She saw that in me. Yeah, no, I mean, she was a wonderful mixed bag, really, and she was devoted to the program and its its content and the people she was doing it for, and was a brilliant editor. When people like me wanted to do my impersonation of George for me for the next 14 verses, she'd cut it down to 2. So she was great, and without being rude, I got many mighty bollockings for not doing things particularly well. So it was a challenge, and I enjoyed, and I think for some people it was too much, the sort of those kind of battles, but I enjoyed it all, really. Not that they were battles, but they were, you wanting to do your thing, and there was a freedom about it. Now it wasn't formulaic in some ways.
So what prompted your departure? Was it a choice you made yourself, or were you kind of said, "Thank you, time to go"?
So if you weren't a priest, I'd think you were giving an underlying thing about some sort of scandal, but it's probably not the podcast to do that. No, but there wasn't a scandal. It was all mythology. Now, I didn't leave for any sort of dark and dubious reason. I just really went back to, I think I missed, prodding at the creative gene really a bit. And, I'd always planned to go back to being an actor, really, or doing other things or creating things. So, I kind of left, and then I kind of went back again, because the next guy didn't kind of work out, really. So I was back and forth a bit, really, which was unusual. And I had my own TV series doing daring things as well. So really it took up most of the 80s, but come the 90s and the kids were growing up, I just, went back to the theatre, and then did lots of other things, musical theatre, started producing things, doing things that I'd instigated, which up until this day I sort of carry on with, really.
Yeah, and I was intrigued to know about the role of Chief Scout. How did that come around? Was that through predominantly through your TV stuff, or?
Well, no, my my mother died suddenly. She fell down the stairs in the mid 90s, and she lived with us, and we had a young family, and we wanted to. We'd always had this idea, because of the Blue Peter days, of doing what I would call backpacking adventures. And we got this strong feeling, and I'd already done early reality stuff where we'd go on these very expensive world adventures and things, and the technology of cameras was changing. They were getting, you didn't have to go with a 10-man crew to film things. And I had this idea with the 4 kids and my wife and a teacher and another friend to backpack around the world. So essentially we put a big map on the wall in the front room, and all the kids pointed out what they wanted to see and where they wanted to go. And we did our best to follow that. So we upped it off for 6 months to see the world, to see, interestingly, how religion and other worlds and other gods played a huge part in that learning thing. So we did it partly to symbolize, it was a gesture to her, almost, oddly, a freedom she'd given us. We probably wouldn't have done it if she'd still been here. And we did it because, one has a nature to discover the world. And of course, as the kids are kind of grown up now, it's had a huge effect on their life to up and off like that and see things firsthand. It's interesting. I'm always, when people go on about education, how kids' lives are being destroyed by education not happening, and school is not there, and there's a part of me that goes, actually, what would have been really good is we could have done it because of COVID, but we should have all upped and off, all travelled far away, and it's the greatest education of all, really. And so that's what we did. So to answer your question, this is another long answer. The Scouts, being a big organization, were looking to celebrate their centenary, and they decided they needed to find a new chief scout. And as in all organizations, they were having a bit of trouble finding that person. So they decided to look outwards, and I ended up on a list of possibles because of Blue Pete history, because of the travel films in particular, because Scouting is a worldwide organization. And I don't know, I never in my wildest dreams imagined the little Cub Scout from Beckenham would end up as Chief Scout, but everyone else, all the other famous people, have kind of faded away. And, I was the last person standing. And when they said, do you want to do it? I almost didn't have a chance to hesitate. My wife thought I was bonkers, really. And it was kind of a tough 5 years, because I was, in a sense, taking a role which was formed for sort of retired people in some ways who've now chosen to lead, who'd worked their way up the hierarchy. And suddenly this cheeky lad or cheeky man has suddenly come in and was supposed to run all these committees and was supposed to do things as if I was retired, of course. And what no one had reckoned was that it would become a huge media story, that suddenly you weren't actually sitting there running committees. You were on telly or talking on the radio about the virtues of Scouting and the goodness that brings to all cultures, but particularly British culture, where it emanated from. And so it became, just by dint of time and pressure, a different kind of job. And of course, Bear Grylls has now taken that on, and he's done it for twice the time I did it, but he's very much a front person, so he doesn't really do all the committees. But initially I was sitting there and working my way through all these sort of signing things and talking about things, and of course, in the end, by my nature, the people I related to was not really the hierarchy. It was more the people that did it, and there was still, there's 500,000 young people that do it, and well over 100,000 volunteers now. So I became sort of more one of them, really, and just sort of like a folk leader, if you like.
Yeah. And I also noticed that, I saw in the news that Marcus Rashford has been awarded a gold Blue Peter medal. And
Greta today. I found that I did a Radio Essex this morning, and I didn't know that both Greta and Marcus had got their gold badge. Join the club, I say.
Yeah. So is that still a proud thing for you? It's a real honour, isn't it, really?
Well, I love it because of scouting. I like the idea that I was surprised by the badge, and I actually got a bit emotional, a bit like J.K. Rowling. There's very few Brits who'd be saying, "Here was your gold badge," who wouldn't go, "What, me? Why me? Why? What have I done?" It's probably better than, in some people's minds, it's more thrilling than getting a knighthood. Really, I suppose. You kind of.
Yeah,
it's
great talking to you, Peter. I want to ask you because the truth is that you're still on TV from time to time, but you've also had this wonderful career in theatre, and I know that you're very passionate about panto, aren't you? And this has been a bit of a wretched time for people in the panto industry, hasn't it? Just tell us about. I was speaking to Jimmy Cricket, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and he was telling about how tough it is in the industry, but particularly for younger guys. I mean, he said he's had a wonderful career, and and as you have, but there's a lot of people that are just not working, aren't there, in your industry at the moment? It must be pretty difficult.
Yeah, it's all freelancers really, because I think it's 80% of the industry relies on freelance work because it's by its nature. Play opens, a play closes, a TV series made. So everybody works pretty much as freelancers unless you're part of a big organization. And of course, when that all stopped, particularly theatre, though films and TV have carried on a bit, all those people didn't have jobs. And though they could get, some self-employment money, perhaps, if they'd made enough to make some, or they could, sort of, as actors in particular, are quite good at doing other things. But it was a kind of decimation of it all, really. And oddly, theatre is a hugely successful industry. So although there's been some help for it, it really was the freelancers that struggled. But what happened to me was that I was on tour doing a musical, and it just stopped, like all these things do. And somehow in my mind, I decided to, in a very modest way, initially film a pantomime in my back garden. And I gathered all these people to do it. And it grew it just grew, and it grew into a big idea. Ended up in cinemas, selling to schools and scouts and guys. It became in the publicity, and all we did really was make a film generally in me and my neighbour's back garden. And I mean, it was an enormous amount of work to do it, and in a sense we did it well, which is why I think it was successful. But that was a profound experience, really, because obviously one had to layer it with the time that you live in. The pantomime's always lived off of the age that it's in, and so there was, as well as all the jokes and the funniness, there was a profundity in there as well, and a sort of sense that wanting to say it's going to be all right, sort of thing. So it was a wonderful experience.
And panto is one of those uniquely British kind of genres, isn't it? That is just growing and growing, or it appears to be. It seems to hold the child captivated, and there's the innuendo squeezed in there for the grown-ups. What is the general appeal, do you think, Peter, of panto?
Yeah.
Is it all those things?
It is those things, but I mean, it's a form of theatre that has existed in all cultures in different ways, that you are appealing to a large audience. If you go way back to the Greeks, they were doing similar kind of things, where you'd have a multi-generational audience, and you'd have almost material and jokes for all those people going on, and elements of what we call slapstick, or elements of storytelling. But I think the profound part of it, if you like, as in all fables, there is always a story about good and bad, really, and there is always a story about the downtrodden, and there's always the story about tyranny, and I think there's very few, and the mistakes that humans in particular make, and it's about love too, and these in pantomimes are woven in, and even before you go and watch a pantomime, you will know the fable before you go. So Jack and the Beanstalk, you will know there's an evil giant somewhere who's doing terrible things and oppressing the people, and you know that there'll be a young lad who will come to the fore and save everyone. So all these things, and how you weave it, how you tell it, is often connected to the age that you're in. Not all pantos do this, I have to say. Some are just sort of parades of displays. I mean, for me as a panto maker, the story is all, narrative is all, the laughter is such an intriguing part of it. But if you're asking me why does it grip people, I think it's those things as well. So for all the schools that saw our panto, the feedback was fantastic, because you could tell by what they said how all those things worked for them. You know, how what you imagine you're going to see actually. So the great thing is that when you're an adult goes to see a pantomime with their kids, and the kids start laughing at the kids' stuff, and the kids watch the parents laugh at some grown-up jokes. I didn't understand that, why they're laughing. But the best bit to me is that when the parents are watching, I don't know, Buttercup the cow being sold to be butchered or something, is that they get caught by the emotion of it. They have somehow brought down their shield, and they find themselves going, he's stolen the cow, you know, and it's almost like embarrassed by their children that they've got involved. And that to me is great panto, that you capture people by storytelling and almost trick them, really.
Yeah. And as somebody that, you know, you strike me as somebody who is spiritual, how difficult has it been for you not being on a stage in front of an audience and not being able to do the things that you kind of at the core of what you are? Have you found it all right or not?
Yeah, no, I have really, because I get on with other stuff and express myself in different ways. And obviously doing the pantomime, it was a full-on doing 10 jobs and being surrounded by people. So I didn't have that terrible experience of being locked up in the same space and not going anywhere. I'm very, very lucky because I have a lovely home and a nice garden. So I'm one of those lucky people, and there are many people, and that's what we should all be looking to, I think, you know. It's almost to do with space in some ways, that when restrictions come and society becomes almost tyrannical about behavior, either for good or for bad, I haven't quite worked that out yet, but it's the people that are isolated and stuck and cannot communicate, that's where it becomes tricky. And I'm impressed by the way, despite sometimes what people in charge or governments or organizations say, the community is often, the community spirit has been the thing that's most impressed me, whether it's Marcus Rashford or somebody going to see, you know, whatever it is, people have sensed they need to do something, and that's created what I've seen, a community, that revival of there is such thing as community. Thatcher was wrong.
Peter, as we kind of, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there, for us all coming through in recent days? How's the future looking? Have you got things ready to go? Are you got things in the pipeline? What your plans for the rest of the year?
Well, that's it. I'm thinking about doing another pantomime, and I'm torn by it because I'd love everything to go back to normal. But you know, when I made this one, I made a judgment, you know, of my view of history, and my instinct told me that the world is not going to be normal, really again. And I, you know, I knew that this would be something that might be useful. The making the panto, something useful that people watch. I'm afraid I have my instincts. If they came to the fore again, I have a kind of pessimism about the future of partly because of the imbalance in human society, the rise of a kind of tyrannical, the rise of authoritarianism, the sheer anger that people express with each other for not being able to fulfill their dreams and ambitions, and I can't see that ending well in the short term, really, and unless this community spirit comes so much to the fore that people just say, I'm sorry, I'm just doing what I want to do, and I have food to eat, shelter, and I'm not doing any of the things you tell me. You know, I'd love there to be a revolution, a non-violent revolution, and not like a typical revolution where people want to lead a revolution so they can be in charge. You know, it came through all the people, and everybody just found ways of being, and I'm saying it's the end of, I suppose I'm saying, and in the mix there, of course, is you know, the likes of Greta and anyone else who you know, we don't have to be super clever to realize that in a very short space of time, in the last few decades particularly, you know, the space that we live on is changing rapidly by diversity. You know, and I suspect that mixed in with you know, the imbalance, economic imbalance of the world, maybe those things will just force everybody to force our leaders to be good leaders as opposed to selfish bad leaders. Dictators living in their palace should be banned to Mars. Build a big spaceship. Let them build palaces on Mars.
But you know what? Whatever you are, Peter, whether you're a sleeping Christian or a Buddhist monk or, you know, an Islamic scholar, there's certainly what I hear are hints of Christianity coming through there, and I certainly applaud you for being so open about that and concur with you absolutely, Peter. It's been, well, I could talk to you all day really, but it's been wonderful. I've only asked about
11.
I've only asked about 3 of the 25 questions I had prepared, but your answers have been so well worth listening to. I've really enjoyed it. And, you know, and
I often, see, at home I get told to shut up. See, you didn't.
No.
To shut up. You see, if I had my daughter.
Yeah, no, it's been great, Peter. It's been really wonderful, and I'm just gonna. So, Peter, it's been really great meeting you and talking to you and just hearing a little bit about your journey and Wandsworth. I think my dad was born in New Malden, which I think is not far from where you are down there somewhere. And
no, it's down the A3. Yeah.
A long time ago, but
very nice to talk to you, Alex. And it's a joy to talk about openly this world and from a sleeping Christian's point of view, as you said. I like that.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Peter. And
I might use that phrase.
We send our love to you from Burnley. Have you ever been to Burnley? Is that a place you?
No, I have been to Burnley. No, I can't remember. I was thinking about it this morning, and I can't remember why I went to Burnley, and I can't remember when I went. But it was, I think it was a Blue Peter trip. There was something I did in Burnley, but I haven't. My neurons haven't quite connected it yet. Really, yeah. I love Burnley football team. I like all the underdogs.
Yeah, we're certainly underdogs in Burnley. Yeah, and I love what you said about being waiting outside and somebody thinking you were a taxi, and then these forces coming in. I was just glad it wasn't the police force who were nicking you for illegally taxiing people across the borough.
I know. Well, maybe if they'd looked in my eyes, they would have thought I'd been on some illicit drugs. So I don't know.
Well, you've just been playing Jesus, so.
yeah. Well, I've got one more story to make you laugh.
Go on.
I made it. It's about the same thing. So I did it many years ago in Furness after Dartford. I did it in Furness Abbey, and this was a bigger production. And again, obviously, I was playing Jesus again. It was fantastic experience, promenading around. But the police up in Furness were pretty sharp, and us. You know, you do the mystery plays. You go down the pub and have maybe a couple of beers and things, and one by one, all the different people were being picked off by the police on their drive home. So, Mary Magdalene had gone, and then finally the Archangel Gabriel got done. They'd all been booked and done. And finally I got stopped, and I listed all the religious people that the police had pulled over and breathalyzed. And I said, look, I'm Jesus. You can't breathalyze me. I said, I may have had just over the 1.5 pints, but I think this would be very bad publicity for the police force. So I think you ought to let me go. And they did. I scared them.
That's a great story to finish with, Peter. Thanks ever so much. Lovely talking to you. And for more of these interviews, you can visit thegodcast.co.uk. But for now, Peter Duncan, thanks for your time and much love from Burnley.
It's a pleasure. Have a lovely day.